Hello and welcome to Rotary Club of Broadbrook, Connecticut's Service Above Self. I'm Gus Large. On this episode of Service Above Self, we'll once again be looking at the vocational awareness side of Rotary. Rotary's Vocation Avenue of Service encourages business professionals to share their expertise with others, including what is involved in embarking on a career path in that profession. Photographers capture and preserve images that paint a picture, tell a story, or record an event. To create commercial quality photographs, photographers need technical expertise, creativity, and their equipment. Today we'll be looking at the field of photography with our guest, Michael Marchand, Managing Partner of Ajara Communications, headquartered in Manchester, Connecticut. Mike may look familiar to you as he has been on our program in the past to talk about being a graphic designer. Mike, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Gus. Very well, and I'm happy to be here.
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
You know, before we get into this, I have to ask you this or point this out because people aren't going to know. We've known each other for a long time, for more than 10 years. And you're kind of a modest guy, so I have to mention this. You have done, in the last year, you've produced and directed a movie. You've done several local marketing campaigns. You're a graphic designer in addition to being a photographer, a sailor. How do you find time to do all this stuff?
Well, very little sleep, I guess, sleep deprivation, and when you add it all up like that, it sounds like a lot. But no, I've found, in a way, my work and my interests kind of overlap in such a way that even when I'm maybe not on the clock or working, I still have those things in mind, and the way in which I got into some of these things, for example, the photography, was just at a personal interest level. So adding that to a hobby that becomes a serious hobby that becomes part of your career is one way that this situation has come about for me.
Okay, so you started in photography as sort of a serious hobby, I take it?
Yes.
So about how long ago was that? Is it as a kid you started taking pictures, or?
In college.
Okay.
I was trying to narrow it down for this talk of when. I've always been interested in the visual arts, photography, cinema, all of that, and so. But I didn't ever get too serious about it or start to build some of my own stockpile of equipment in that sense. And so I was in college, and I was studying journalism at the time, and I took an elective in photography thinking this would be a nice kind of tool to have in my arsenal for the work that I would be doing, because if you're out there capturing stories, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, that's going to help add to your story as a journalist. And so I started off actually by borrowing this little camera here. It's a 35 millimeter.
Okay, so that's actually a film camera, right?
Yes, and practically historic at this point. I think this comes all the way back from the 70s to us.
Okay.
And it's an old Minolta. My father got it on a layover in Japan when he was there. And it's a wonderful, simple little camera, and it takes wonderful pictures. I always loved the color, the colors that it got. It had a couple of dings along the way, and it's unable to kind of use other lenses other than this sort of standard wide-angle lens, but otherwise it's just a very simple, shoot it and control it camera.
Now, does that have a little bit of a different quality when you're using film as opposed to using digital? Does the image come out different, or is it really the same as digital in terms of quality?
It's similar. I mean, I feel like that the digital technology now has come along so way that to the untrained eye, or even the trained eye in some regards, it's difficult to tell the difference. In the early days, a lot of the purists in the photography field were not moving toward digital right away because the technology was not there yet, and you would get different results. But even now, and this will kind of segue us into photography as a career and the tools of the trade, having these digital options makes some parts of the job so much easier and quicker.
Since you mentioned that, there are in photography obviously dozens of different specialties. I mean, so for some of the images you've brought, I mean, it's not just everyday pictures like at a wedding, let's say. It's photographs of products, photographs of food, I know is a particular specialty. Tell us about some of the specialties in photography.
Yeah, photography is so interesting because you can get into so many niche areas if there's something that really interests you. And you're right, a wide spectrum from working with people a lot, doing your portrait photography and wedding photographers. I almost think, you know, weddings and events, that's almost a whole nother category, right down to the people who are working in the studio for advertising and maybe even with equipment that's of different formats to get them higher quality results for what they're shooting. So matching the equipment with the task at hand and the demands of the project.
So what sorts of photography are you primarily doing day to day?
Well, it's interesting. I got so I got into photography with this interest in school, and it built. And when I really began using photography, and when I would consider myself a photographer, getting paid, when I get paid to do that type of work, I was sort of already beginning to use it in the graphic design sense. And so a lot of the photography I do is thinking in mind of what the final use or the final presentation of the image is going to be. In some cases, you may see something that I like that and the subject is way off center, and it may strike you as a little odd, but in the project sense, we may be planning to put text or something else in there, and I don't really want that to compete with the image itself, so I'm thinking of the end goal in mind.
Okay.
Versus someone who just needs to end with that perfect picture of, you know, the bride and groom, you know, kissing for the first time, or, you know, that expression in a portrait or something that's needed.
And now I would imagine nowadays that you have a lot more freedom when you're taking photos in terms of, I know that since cameras have gone almost, is it basically 100% digital now? Is film dead?
In a practical sense, yeah, everybody's into digital. I think you still get some highly specialized areas where, again, you may have a career in, you know, some artistic photography or something where you're trying to get certain results, and you can't just capture that without using an old film camera, or you really want that. But I find people now using it because the cost is higher, and because on a technical side, there's a little more risk and a little more involved, that they use that for a very, you know, to capture a specialty image.
So you have this freedom with the digital because now once you've taken the picture, there are so many different ways you can edit it today. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep, that's even another layer. My first thought goes to, in terms of supplies, you're not dealing with film.
Okay.
I shot my first wedding years ago. There were two of us shooting, and we were both using 35mm cameras. So I had about 18 rolls of this that went off to develop, that I didn't know for 2 days afterwards.
As opposed to one little stick now that you could just keep in your pocket that
right.
holds all those photos.
Not only do you have a card that may have 1,000 or 2,000 images on it, you can also look right on the camera, obviously everyone knows, on the screen, to see if you're getting your shots.
So you don't even have to wait for it to be developed anymore. And I know that you can erase images right away. And
you could. You didn't get the shot. You could delete it to save the space.
Yeah.
But you're not so concerned with the developing cost, because everything being electronic, you're moving it right from your camera or your card into your computer.
Well, now,
and you can edit and sort through it there.
As you know, a career in photography, how important is it for the photographer to know how to do the editing? Is that a different job, or is that really part of the whole package of being a photographer?
Larger shops or studios will have people sort of designated to do different tasks. In other words, the photographer will keep shooting, someone else will process and work with the images and get them ready for the client to view, also do initial color correction. I think the photographer in the end always likes to come back in. I know I do, come back into Photoshop, even if an assistant had, you know, done an initial color correction, just to check the levels, make sure everything's okay, that it goes out. Quality control. You get a lot. You can do a lot with Photoshop now, sort of post-production, that I think everybody utilizes.
Okay. So if someone were going to get into the field of photography now, with all these different avenues available to them, all these different types of photography. What kind of advice would you give them to get started? Is just buy a camera and get going, or?
Well, in one sense, it's a wide open field, right? We don't need to have a degree like a doctor would or an attorney to be a practicing photographer. But with that in mind, there's an extremely wide range of talents and values that you can get out there as a consumer. So there's that side of it. But as a photographer, I would say you want to have some equipment that you're comfortable with and have a technical feel and understanding for the equipment that you'll be using, because pretty soon, for it to work, someone's going to have to trust you to hand over their money so that you can take their pictures, and at that point they're going to expect you to be as professional as you can be.
Okay. So now, would I if I wanted to go out and seriously get into photography, would I need something like a camera like this that's looks pretty technical to me, actually, or could I start with something simpler? I mean, I have. We've all got these cameras on our phones now. These I don't know how many megapixels it is, but are these any good? Can you take a good picture with these? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the same. All of the same techniques apply. We may, talk a little bit about that, but composing a picture and elements that make a strong picture, you're going to have limitations on those. A lot of the consumer type equipment is fully automatic, and in some degrees those phones will be too, unless there's an app that would allow you to adjust down the shutter speed.
So you don't necessarily have the freedom to have the camera perform the way you want. It does it all for you.
That's one of the things that that would be one of the warnings, as you were saying, somebody thinking about this field, getting into it. What I like about these cameras is that you can control the f-stop and the shutter speed to affect the amount of light that is resulting to create the image, and those technical things. Whereas just what we call a standard point and shoot, you can set it to say, hey, it's a cloudy day, or hey, it's a bright sun, or I'm under fluorescence. But those are generalizations that the camera company has programmed into the camera to adjust for the average of what you'd run into in those conditions.
I want to get back to that because lighting, the whole lighting thing is something I really find fascinating, and I'm looking at the clock and we need to take a break. You'll stay with us for a couple minutes?
Absolutely.
We'll take a break and we'll come right back.
This is a tree that was never chopped down to make a crutch that was never needed by a child who never got polio, because medicine was never in short supply, thanks to people whose compassion wasn't either. Over the past 20 years, Rotary Club members have helped immunize over 2 billion children against polio. Thanks to them, the world will soon be polio-free. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Welcome back. We're talking with Mike Marchand of Ajar Communications in Manchester, Connecticut, about a career in photography. Mike, I want to come back what we were talking about before the break, a little bit about the lighting. I find this fascinating, these contraptions that you have that apparently, do they diffuse light? Is that what's happening?
It's, well, it's all what you need to do at a particular time, but a lot about photography is the science of light and how the camera is going to be able to interpret that. So it really depends on do you want like a soft light or a soft look to your image? Are you trying to do something that's a little more edgy and maybe has a higher contrast? You can really move your light around in different ways to interact with your subject to get a very different feel or emotions out of the image.
Now, is that something that an amateur photographer ought to be paying attention to as well in taking photographs at home, the lighting?
I think yes. I think that's the people who really excel at this field continuously study and improve on their lighting techniques. And that really starts to distinguish where professional photography is above the amateur and photography of the general public. Because let's face it, with the way technology is going, it puts a lot of these powerful tools right in the hands of everybody. Whereas before a certain camera may just be priced out of somebody's limit unless they were a professional photographer. Now you can get the equipment, consumer and also what they call prosumer level equipment that is very high end and technically capable of achieving great images and great files. But at the end of the day, the person operating that equipment needs to have enough knowledge base to get the lighting and the techniques right.
So it's not necessarily just as simple as putting up one of these sort of these. What do they call it? It looks like an umbrella. It's and the light is on it, and it.
Yeah, I just call them my light stands.
Okay.
I have a mini one here.
Okay.
That I use. So, and then at the studio we also have these very large, full size that I could raise up to, say, 10, 11 feet in the air and get over a subject. Around it, behind it, you want to think about your different, your backlighting and how you're lighting the subject themselves.
So it's not necessarily just as simple as turning on the light and pointing it. You need to really know where to put it and how to set it.
Right.
And I assume that the camera setting has a lot to do with that as well.
Correct. Yeah, you'd set your lighting and then your manual adjustments on your camera to get the shutter speed and the f-stop to achieve the image that you wanted. But sometimes, like shining a direct light on this, on something, I might get a glare on a shiny surface. Say if I was lighting the rotary mug or something, and in my picture, I don't want flares coming off of it. I may diffuse this in different ways. I could use translucent or opaque sheeting right in front of this, or like you were saying, the umbrella, like in the, you kind of see those. This is an entire, when I'm shooting product stuff, it's an entire light box that just, expand this out.
Oh, so this is for filming,
Yeah.
objects, I take it.
Exactly. I'll block
Okay.
everything here by putting this here. But yeah,
Okay.
I put the object inside, and I can light all around it, and it's a softer light that comes in.
Incredible.
And but then, obviously, you can't get something big in there, so then we might use the umbrellas or different things that would cover right over, diffuse the light right from the source.
Now, if I'm taking a picture at home, I want to take some pictures during the holidays, let's say, and I don't have any of this equipment. Is there something that I can do at home with a lamp or some rule of thumb that I can follow?
Well, you can always try to shoot people in good lighting in the room. Just kind of follow where your eye likes the lighting, and the camera can probably follow that. For the most part, we use the lighting in the studio, especially when we're working with inanimate objects. To shoot a picture of a soup can or a product or whatever. The product's not moving or making facial expressions or that. It's a different. You could take your time more and have more patience. When you're working with people, you want to be quicker, and then obviously you're dealing a lot with. You may not have enough light in the room, so you want to bring a flash into it and use that. A lot of cameras have an onboard flash that just goes right off, or this would be one that it goes on the shoe of the camera here. And I would use this to sync up with the camera and my shutter and emit the light to light my subject. But flash work can be tricky as well. A lot of times we get that problem of red eye or a bright.
I wanted to ask you about that
flare.
because now it seems that there's some technology that can take that away automatically, the red eye.
There is some that you could do, yeah, post-production wise, take the red eye out and say Photoshop or a tool, Another way is
the flash is what can cause that?
The flash is essentially what causes that, and I find it's worse when it's like a direct hit of the flash. It's shining right on somebody's face or something that you don't want to overly light, and so you can get other levels of flash equipment, and this one is a simple. Again, it goes on a shoe mount, but the flash part itself is adjustable. And I can take this, and this is a good little tip when you're shooting with people, and use a bounce flash so you're not directly on them. But if you have, say you're in a room with a white ceiling, you can actually bounce the flash off the ceiling, come down, light it, and your subjects aren't getting hit with a direct blast.
Interesting.
So you're sort of bouncing the light around.
Uh-huh. Now, how important is the lighting outside? Is that just a whole different ball game, or do you still use some of this equipment outside?
I use some of it outside. It depends on, then you're dealing with the natural lighting of the sun and the clouds, or you have an overcast day. Sometimes you get harsh lighting, especially I find it challenging if I'm shooting wedding photography in the middle of the day and there's a lot of hard shadows, you know, when the sun is at its highest point. What can you do to sort of lighten up those really dark areas that will be in somebody's face, and at the same time not point them directly into the sun so that they're squinting and they're having a hard time. As a photographer, you have to think about, you know, the technical aspect of the equipment and how that's functioning, the environment around you and the light that you're getting, and then add people into the mix and what they're doing and how comfortable do they feel in front of the camera. What can you do to make them feel more comfortable?
Now that's got to be a
natural.
big part of this, more than just the technical aspects of photography, especially. And we have some of your wedding pictures here I'd like to look at. Is it more difficult working with people at an affair like that, at a wedding? Are they you make your job tougher?
It can be. I find weddings to be very stressful because at times things happen very rapidly, and they only happen once, and then, you know, that's it, and we've moved on. You know, they cut the cake. They're not going to go back and recut the cake for us because something wasn't working on the camera, or so. That's another thing that professional photographers are very prepared with, also having the other equipment that they may need in case something goes wrong or a card fills up. You'll see a wedding photographer with a second camera. And maybe they have it just for a backup, or maybe they're really have that on hand so that they can just go to a different lens without having to switch out the lenses, because that could be a time thing. Whereas if you're working in the studio and your food products, you know, it's not, you can change out your lens and go to, say, you know,
but the bride only says I do once,
or something
right?
wider.
Yeah.
Right, but with people when they're interacting, you have that moment and then it's done. You can't kind of recreate that,
now,
so you want to capture it.
Do you always work with, you and I talked about this before, a partner during weddings to make sure if something goes wrong that you've got that backup, or do you do it solo as well?
I do. I feel more comfortable with somebody else there. That person is usually another photographer and they're shooting along with me, or someone who's assisting. So they're helping me stay on top of all my tasks at hand, and then when we have downtime, they're taking an extra camera and you know, using it to capture some of the other things going on at the event. And likewise, I've done the same. I've assisted other wedding photographers who I really admire. I appreciate their work. They're outstanding. And when I work with other professionals in the field, I'm always trying to learn something. And if you can find someone that's willing to share some of that insight, some of their expertise, you can become better. And that's how I approach the field and other professionals. Not that we're in competition, but what can we learn and benefit from one another?
Do you mind if we take a look at some of your wedding photos here? Because some of these that I've seen before are, that's a nice picture, the bride and groom on the water there, but some of these pictures that you've taken are a little, at least in my, maybe not in your experience, but in my experience, atypical of a wedding photo.
Yeah.
They're kind of fun. Maybe you could scroll to some of the ones you know I'm talking about.
Yeah, some of these are standard, and we're again, this is one where we're trying not, it's a bright point of the day, we're not trying not to put them in the light and, you know, make them uncomfortable. We try to get in close and get some of the details of the day, so that could be the flowers or the rings.
Is that a beach wedding? Okay.
Yeah, we've gone on location. That's a nice thing about, you can bring a photographer along if you have a destination wedding. You know, someone along to document all of that going on. So, and capture some of that. The preparations, people getting ready. That's another reason why it's nice to work with two photographers. One of us could be with the brides and the bride and the bridesmaids as they're preparing, while the groomsmen get ready separately. Kind of document that and bring it all together. Our approach is to get to know the couple and to kind of have a photojournalistic approach for the wedding. So we'll sit with them and take their, seated pictures, but otherwise we're trying to sort of capture the special moments that happen. And maybe that's why some of the ones we mix in there are different, because we capture those. This was just a moment with the bride just before she was going out, and I was alone with her, and their location was also a destination, so they had this tent to get ready in, and it just kind of, she had a moment beforehand to sort of see herself, and, I wanted to give that feel of how she was seeing herself in the mirror.
I'd like to look at one of the ones you had one that I call the Alfred Hitchcock picture. Can you show us that one?
Yeah, I'll skip through some of these other,
Okay.
some of the details. Sometimes it's just we try to do, you mentioned the movies, and we always think like, cinematic stuff, so sometimes we try to get people in action, or just a lot of us, we get out there and we have to be in front of the camera, but we're not actors or professional models,
Yeah.
so that's another challenge, working with people who, they may not
Are
be
nervous
comfortable on that
and-
side,
yeah.
So put them at ease, try to get nice composition.
That's a great shot right there. Where was that?
This was out in eastern Connecticut near Rhode Island at like a summer camp that they had got in just before the season hit. So we had the challenge of not having maybe the nicest foliage, but having these nice rustic New England, brick walls and other stuff. So we kind of, we had a mix of the wedding party. We just kind of spread it out. And this is another part of being a photographer, sort of being a director on set and getting people where you want and taking your time to get that shot.
We have less than a minute left, so
Okay.
I want to. Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah.
How did she get them to do that, by the way? That's
This
previous. There you go.
Previous, yeah. We
That's
had
a
her up
great
on the
shot.
wall for a shot, and she had to get down in this big old dress. So she just kind of climbed on his back, and it was just a moment that happened.
That's a great one for the wedding album.
We were holding up the dress so it didn't get dirty.
And then, we've got 10 seconds left. Show us that
Oh.
the Alfred Hitchcock.
And then,
picture
yeah,
movie.
here
That's a
they
great
are,
one, too.
Endless Summer. And then,
Now that's a bride and groom cutting the cake right there. That's a good one to end on.
yes, this was one where the camera captured. Actually, everybody was standing around taking pictures. Everybody was, I think, in the room, and the flash effect is coming off of somebody else's camera.
So
But
it was almost
created this
accidental.
really spooky kind of like movie effect of harken to Psycho or something from Alfred Hitchcock.
Mike, I wish we had more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to see you. And thank all of you for watching Service Above Self. Until next time, as always, we encourage you to go out and find a worthy cause and lend a helping hand.